Alan Dershowitz is a well-known lawyer, a Harvard Law School professor, and of course, at the time, one of O.J. Simpson's defense team. It's great to talk to you today.
Thank you.
When we're hearing from LAPD that they have a knife that they're investigating, can you give me your reaction to that?
Well, there are always two verdicts in every high-profile criminal case. The verdict of the court, which can't be disturbed even if there's new evidence, and the verdict of history, which is always open to reconsideration. There are no double jeopardy clauses in history. There are no statute of limitations. And everybody is entitled to have all the evidence come forward and make their own decisions about the reality of what happened. So I welcome this new evidence. Let's see if it's valid. Let's see if it passes the test of credibility, and let history judge.
LAPD reportedly has had this knife back in its possession for a month now. Can you think of a plausible legal explanation for why they would come forward just now and say, okay, now the rush is on to investigate, to try and glean any DNA off of this knife?
Well, obviously, everybody thinks it has something to do with the fact that people in America are watching the O.J. trial on television. Again, look, the LAPD bungled this case terribly 20 years ago, and apparently they're bungling it again. 20 years ago, there was a knife that was found in O.J. Simpson's bureau in his bedroom behind a mirror that the police never even moved. We found it and turned it over to the court. It had no relation to any crime. But if this knife was anywhere in O.J. Simpson's house, the police clearly should have found it during the initial investigation. Why it took months for it to be turned over to the police and then again, weeks at least before it's publicly revealed, will remain a mystery. And of course, there's no chain of custody here. And so this could not be used in any legal proceeding, but it's an interesting piece of history. And we'll wait and see whether it bears any relevance to what happened or didn't happen that terrible night 20 years ago.
The story goes that a construction worker found the knife when they were on site several years after the acquittal of O.J. Simpson, and then turned that knife over to an off-duty police officer who was working for a movie studio at the time. That police officer, for whatever reason, sat on the knife and sat on it and sat on it, and only recently turned that over, almost 20 years later, to police. Could there be legal ramifications against that police officer now?
It's certainly administrative, if not legal ramifications. Police officers have an obligation to deal with evidence credibly, but the LAPD has a real problem, and they've had it for years. They took home blood samples, what they shouldn't have done during the trial itself, and our evidence was that they poured some of the blood on one of O.J. Simpson's socks to create a piece of incriminating evidence in order to frame somebody that they honestly believed was guilty. So, you know, the LAPD has had a long history of not handling evidence very well, and that probably explains why the jury came to a not guilty verdict.
Do you think that the O.J. Simpson trial, with all of its focus on racism, especially from the lead detective, Ron Furman, who had lied on the stand and said he had never used the N-word, and then, of course, your defense team came out with tape that clearly showed him over and over again using that word. Do you think it changed the way that LAPD moved forward in its dealings with the community?
I would hope that they learned some lessons from the O.J. Simpson case. Look, we caught them doing something they've probably done for a long time, and that is planting evidence in order to convict people they believe are guilty. I don't think they plant evidence against people they think are innocent. By the way, I think they would have done the same thing had the defendant been white. I don't think that they planted the evidence against O.J. because he was black. I think they planted it because they thought he was guilty. And I would hope that the LAPD has learned a lesson. I'm told that it's a much better police department than it was 20 years ago.
It's interesting that back then, as a nation, I mean, I was in college at the time, we were all glued to the television every single day. And when that verdict came out, to see everyone stopping in their tracks, no matter what was on your agenda today, to watch the verdict come out, and the way that we as a nation felt divided in some ways in what we were hoping for in terms of a verdict was very memorable. It's very memorable in my own mind. And fast forward to 20 years, and we're watching a similar, if perhaps less famous, because he's not a celebrity, but what's happening with the making of a murderer on Netflix in the case of Stephen Avery. Do you see similarities in the way police handle evidence and the way that the public can be stirred in its attention to criminal cases, and whether the justice system is truly just.
Look, from the beginning of history, criminal trials have been a focal point of theater. People love murder trials. Shakespeare, the Bible, all of literature focuses on murder trials, particularly whodunit murder trials, and particularly when you combine that with fame and race. Of course, there's going to be a lot of attention paid to it. And the fact that this has enduring audience interest 20 years later demonstrates that A, we haven't solved our racial problems in America. B, we haven't solved problems of criminal justice and handling evidence. I think DNA has made criminal cases much more certain in many ways, but we still have a long way to go.
Mr. Dershowitz, looking back on this, and especially just on the heels of the television series that came out on the O.J. Simpson trial, are you proud of your performance as part of the defense team for O.J. Simpson?
I'm very proud. We helped reveal police misconduct. We helped demonstrate that there was still racial tensions in America. We showed how the legal system worked. My job as a criminal defense attorney is not to decide who did it or whether my client is guilty, but to present ethically and legally the best case I can for my defendant. So sure, I'm very proud of my role in helping to win that case. I'm proud of my role in helping to win many other cases. The American legal system depends on zealous advocates on both sides.
It's so great of you to join us to share your memories of the case back then and your perspective on the new discovery of this knife now and what it could mean in terms of the history and legacy of the O.J. Simpson case. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much.